You set, Kevin? All right, cool. Thank you. All right, well, thank you for being here tonight. We're going to start off in Proverbs chapter 26, if you'd like to go ahead and turn there. Proverbs chapter 26. We've been in this book for a while. We started the book of Proverbs with this new year in 2021. And this new year, listen to me, it's almost over. It's November. And so we're on track to finish on the second week of December, I think. So we're almost done with the book of Proverbs. But what we've seen over and over in this book is that Solomon is giving his son advice. He's been telling his son things to stay away from, things that would be good for him to do. And tonight we're going to look at some more advice that he gives his son in two regards. He's going to talk to his son about how to deal with fools and then how to discern the facts. And so we're going to talk about those two things tonight, dealing with fools and then discerning the facts. The word fool comes up so much in this book. We know the fool is who we don't want to be. Everything Solomon was telling his son was so that he would not become those foolish people that he saw everywhere. And so let's start off tonight by talking about the fools. If you have turned to Proverbs chapter 26, we're going to begin reading in verse 4. And this is one of the lengthier passages that we'll read as we've been doing it this way. We'll read from verse 4 down to verse 11. So here's what Proverbs 26 says, beginning in verse 4. It says this: "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Whoever sends a message by the hand of a fool cuts off his own feet and drinks violence. Like a lame man's legs, which hang useless, is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Like one who binds the stone to the sling is one who gives honor to a fool. Like a thorn that goes up into the hand of a drunkard is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. Like an archer who wounds everyone is one who hires a passing fool or drunkard." And then verse 11, a classic. "Like a dog that returns to his vomit is a fool who repeats his folly." Solomon is a humorous guy. He takes some of these same truths and restates them in some very poetic and interesting ways. Just picturing a dog, if you've ever had the privilege of watching a dog do that, dogs get sick and sometimes they will regurgitate and then immediately start eating that up, and that's, if you ever look at that and just wonder, what makes a dog think, I bet that's tasty, and then they will sit there and eat it all, and it's absolutely disgusting. And as we're sitting there as humans looking at a dog thinking, "You're crazy, dog." Well, that's what Solomon says. Well, that's just like a fool who repeats his own mistakes. We have this definition of the word insanity where we say you do the same thing over and over and you expect different results. Well, that's what fools do. They repeat their folly. They think, well, it hasn't worked for me the last 99 times. Maybe the 100th time is a charm. And they will repeat their own mistakes. It's such a foolish thing to do, expecting a different outcome, but they haven't yet learned from history that there's not going to be a different outcome. It'll be the same. It'll be something foolish, and then there will be repercussions. But at the beginning of this passage we read, it almost looks like Solomon is contradicting himself. The first verse we saw, he says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly." But then what does the very next verse say? "Answer a fool according to his folly." So which is it, Solomon? Are we not supposed to answer the fool, or are we supposed to answer the fool? Well, this takes wisdom. We have to know when to answer a fool and when to ignore a fool. Y'all know I went to the football game on Saturday. I'm a Gator fan, not a very good football game for us. In fact, historically, one of the worst Florida games in the last probably 50 years or something. But all these people around me, see, I thought we had visitor tickets. Every time I go to Williams-Brice, somebody says, "Hey, can't go to the game. Do you want my tickets?" And I always go and I sit around all these people wearing garnet and black, waving their towels, jumping up and down while Sandstorm plays. And it's never a fun experience. I mean, we've won every game that I've been to, but I thought I would enjoy the game a lot more if I don't sit around Gamecock fans. So this time we went online. I turned down several offers of tickets, and I said, we're going to get tickets in the visitor section. So online I read, section 501 is visitor seating. Well, I'm here to tell you that section 501 is not visitor seating, because we were the only Gator fans once again. Now, I look down directly below us. There's the band, the cheerleaders, Albert the alligators walking around, and everybody directly below us is wearing orange and blue. We're up above them with Gamecock fans all around us. So they're letting me know through the whole game who's winning. You know, they're having the time of their lives. And as I had to remind my children, look, Gamecock fans aren't used to winning. You know, just let them have their fun. It doesn't happen very often, okay? Just ignore them. But as it progressed throughout the course of the game, and I'm a little agitated. And, I'm frustrated because we're not playing well. We look like, the team looks like they'd rather not be there. The Gamecocks look like they're having the time of their lives. They're just going crazy, having fun. And so throughout the game, as it's getting late, people start shaking their keys at us. You better head back to Florida. Just the whole time they're talking trash. And Alicia just kept telling me, it's not worth it. Don't say anything. It's not worth it. Don't say, I don't know what she thought I was going to do. I was minding my manners. I was more worried about her, but that's a joke. But you have to remind yourself sometimes that when all these fans are talking trash around you, sometimes you just got to learn to bite your tongue. I was telling somebody yesterday that when there was about 5 minutes left. I told Alicia, we've stayed this long, let's stay till the end. Very next play, we throw an interception. South Carolina runs down to like the 10-yard line. I said, that's it, let's go. If I hear that rooster one more time, I'm going to lose it. And so I said, I've got to get out of here before they score another touchdown. And so as we're walking out, everybody's shaking their keys at us. Bye, drive safe, being sarcastic, And but it occurred to me, I have done that very thing to every SEC team as a season ticket holder growing up. Every time I'd watch Alabama fans leave and I start shaking my keys at them, And so it was my turn to be on the receiving end of some of that. But it occurred to me that if you yell back at them or say, then I'm not going to look like the bigger person. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the people talking trash. They're having fun. Nobody crossed the line. It's sports. I've done it. It's all good. But you've got to realize, and there's sometimes you just got to shut your mouth and take it. You don't answer them back in that situation. Because if I say something, then they're going to say something, and it's just going to escalate. And so sometimes you've got to learn to just shut your mouth and say, just let them have fun, let them talk trash. I just want to get safely to the car and get back home. And in life, that's just a silly football game, but in life, we've got to learn sometimes when to shut our mouths, when to not say anything back. Politics gets brought up at work, and everybody's saying something, and you want to chime in, but what are you going to do? Change their vote? Are they going to change party affiliation because of something you say? Just keep your mouth shut sometimes and understand this is not the time to speak. Don't answer a fool according to his folly. Why? He says, lest you become like one of them. Whenever we speak back, we don't take the higher ground. We get down in the mud with other people. If you want to maintain the higher ground, 9 times out of 10, it means just don't say anything. Bite your tongue and understand they're trying to goad me here. They want me to do something. They're going for a response, and I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to ignore them. I'm going to keep working, or I'm going to go over here, or I'm going to leave in the fourth quarter, or whatever you've got to do, but you've got to learn this is not the time for me to speak. But sometimes it is the time to speak up. The very next verse, he says, answer a fool according to his folly. Why? Lest he think he's right in his own eyes. There are times when we just can't let something go unchallenged. If somebody comes in and says, oh, you believe in Jesus, he never even existed. It's time for me to speak up, right? I can't let somebody get away with saying that Jesus never even existed. And so I've got to tell them, well, historically that's not true. We know from history that Jesus existed. We know that he was crucified. We know from historians about the empty tomb. There's a time to speak up. Now, there's a way to do it. We're not trying to win arguments. We're not trying to own them, as people like to say these days. But we can't let somebody get away with some comments. There's a time to speak up. When somebody says, you're a bigot or you're hateful, like we talked about Sunday night, say, I'm sorry, but I'm not hateful. I'm allowed to believe this without being hateful. I don't want you to be right in your own eyes by saying something that needs to be corrected. How do we know when to speak up and when to shut up? Well, it takes wisdom. And that's what Solomon's been talking about this whole time. As we learn to grow in wisdom, as we learn to let the Holy Spirit lead us, the Holy Spirit's going to say sometimes, just shut up. And sometimes the Holy Spirit's going to say, you need to speak up. And as we're sensitive to that, we're going to know when the time is right what we're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, if I were to say the majority of the time, what do? I think the majority of the time is just don't say anything at all. The majority of the time is don't answer a fool according to his folly, because you're probably not going to teach the fool anything. And that's why he begins to tell us a proverb in the mouth of a fool. It's like a sharp thorn getting stuck in your hand. You ever done that working on your rose bush? You're trying to prune it back a little bit, and you get one of those sharp thorns in your finger. He says a proverb in the mouth of the fool is as useless as a lame man's legs that dangle beneath him. That's a nice picture there, isn't it? Somebody's legs that, just according to Solomon, let's just be honest, they're not serving a purpose as far as walking goes. And that's what a proverb in the mouth of a fool is. You can tell somebody, yeah, well, the Bible says, but really, realistically, what are they going to do with that information? You might as well just prick your own finger with a thorn. You might as well be just like those dangling legs, because you're casting your pearls before swine. I'm not saying don't try to speak to them, don't teach them, don't try to convert them. But at the end of the day, we need to consider the source and understand the situation and say, I've said my thing, and it's probably best now if I just move on and pray that the Lord will deal with their heart, because there's not much more that I'm going to be able to say and really make a difference in this person's life. He says it's like hiring an archer, a blind archer. Imagine a blind person with a bow and arrow. How do we think that's going to turn out? Yeah, not good. Someone's about to get hurt here, and so we don't want a blind person reaching back and grabbing an arrow and pulling it back like, hey, what are you doing with that thing? And that's what a proverb in the mouth of a fool. A person who hires a fool to do a job is like someone that brings in a blind archer to the workplace. You're asking for somebody to get hurt. And then he mentions the last thing I want to point out from this passage before we move on is, which one is it here? Anyway, I don't see. I think maybe I covered them all. We got the dog in his vomit, right? So that's probably, he mentions carrying a letter. The fools were not to be trusted even with carrying a letter. In those days, they didn't have a post office. And so somebody would be entrusted with carrying a letter. Hey, can you take this correspondence over there to someone? And that seems like a pretty easy task. But you wouldn't even trust a fool with something as simple as, hey, can you carry this from here to there? You ever have something get lost in the mail, and you were waiting on something that never arrived? Well, why would you hand a fool something important and say, can you take it to this person? They're not to be trusted. That's why Proverbs 29:9 says, if a wise man has an argument with a fool, the fool only rages and laughs, and there is no quiet. We can have debates and discussions if we want to, but arguing with a fool is just a waste of time. Proverbs 27:2 returns to this idea of a dog returning to his vomit. It says, crush a fool in a mortar with a pestle along with crushed grain, yet his folly will not depart from him. Just like the dog returning to his vomit. You could talk about, remember the mortar and pestle where you would put stuff in it and just grind it up? And he's saying that a fool's folly is not going to depart from him no matter how much you beat him with the pestle. We could think about discipline. Maybe it's somebody who's been arrested and served time because of something they did, and you think, we've rehabilitated this person. But if they're fools, rather than learning from it, they're going to get right out and do the same thing. We're not separating the folly from a fool. We can try to discipline our children, but if they're foolish, they're not going to learn from that, and they're going to keep repeating their mistakes. We don't want to be like that. If the Lord is crushing us with that pestle, we want to say, Lord, what are you trying to teach me? I don't want to repeat these mistakes, and I don't want to go through this being crushed up experience again. So let's learn our lessons and move on. Proverbs 24 and verse 7 says, wisdom is too high for a fool. In the gate, he does not open his mouth. The gate is a reference to the city gates. If you know much about those ancient cultures, the city gate is where a lot of business was transacted, but it's also where a lot of legal cases were decided. At the city gate is where the older and wiser people, they always talk about the gray hair at the gate. It's where people of wisdom would sit around and discuss things. Sometimes you might sit around, have a cup of coffee, and say, after talking for an hour, say, well, I think we solved all the world's problems today. You ever say something like that? Hey, what are y'all doing? Well, we're just sitting here solving the world's problems. And that's kind of what happened at the city gates. Wise people would sit around and they would talk about things, but a fool would dare not open his mouth. If a fool has any smarts about him, he'd realize, I'm in way over my head here. These people are all much wiser than me, and I have nothing to add to the conversation. But what we've seen in other places in Proverbs is more often than not, fools want to chime in and they kind of have, can I say diarrhea of the mouth? Is that an okay expression to say? Where they just talk and talk and talk and talk, and the more they talk, the more you realize these people don't have a clue what they're talking about. Proverbs 14:24. 14:24 says, the crown of the wise is their wealth, but the folly of fools brings folly. Who wears a crown? We think about royalty. The crown of the wise is their wealth. These people that through their wisdom and their wise decision making, they have gotten themselves into a place where maybe they're comfortable, maybe by making wise decisions they've gotten the life that they set out to find. But the fools wear no such crown. Instead of a crown of wealth, they have a crown of folly. Their poor decisions have, rather than given them the life they wanted, their poor decisions have left them saying, this is not how I planned it. Boy, I never thought it was going to be like this. It comes down to wise decisions. Similarly, Proverbs 16 and verse 22 says, good sense is a fountain of life to him who has it, but the instruction of fools is folly. If a fool tries to give you instructions, better just ignore him. It's one of those times where somebody's like, have you tried it like this? No, but thank you anyway. I'm just going to ignore that advice, and I'm going to go on now, because fools don't have any good advice that they can offer us. But on the other hand, common sense is a fountain of life. Fountains, again, they didn't have running water, so fountains were a source of life in those days. You needed to be near water, and if you lived near a fountain, then your life was going to be much easier, and your life was going to be much better. Common sense is a fountain of life. Knowing who to take advice from is a fountain of life. Learning things through trial and error, picking up information along the way is a fountain of life. I've made my share of mistakes, whether trying to fix things or build things, and I've ruined many things. But along the way, I try to realize, okay, that didn't go very well, but next time I know not to do it that way. That's a fountain of life. We all make mistakes, but let's learn from them. Proverbs 13:14 says, the teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, that one may turn away from the snares of death. The snares of death refer to snares, or the traps that they would lay out for animals. So on the one hand, you can either have a fountain of life, water gushing out and giving us what we need, or you can walk into a trap and be caught, and where you just have to wait for the hunter or the trapper to come and get you. There's another humorous proverb in 17:12. Proverbs 17:12 says, let a man, and by the way, Bobby, this one's for you. On Thursday morning in our Bible study, he came in and read this one to us, and I didn't say anything, but I was looking forward to this. Proverbs 17:12 says, let a man meet a she-bear robbed of her cubs rather than a fool in his folly. It's better to meet a bear, a she-bear, a mama bear, robbed of her cubs, than to meet a fool in his folly, or a fool who's in one of his moods. That's kind of what it means like that. When he's having one of his moods, you want to stay as far away from him as you can. My wife is terrified of bears. I've talked about that. It's probably her greatest fear in life. It's like, hey, you want to go to the mountains? I don't know. Are the bears hibernating, or is it safe? It'll make or break whether or not we go to Tennessee sometimes. It depends on how scared of bears she is. And of course, I know, y'all had a run-in with a bear there in Pigeon Forge not too long ago. I know Livy and Haley, and they had a video of a bear just kind of walking right by him in broad daylight, so I didn't tell Alicia about that. So we'd never go back to Tennessee if she heard about that. But boy, a bear robbed of her cubs. You kidnap a cub and mama bear comes out and she can't find her cubs. Boy, she's going to be aggressive. She's not going to be happy. But it's better to meet a mama bear who can't find her cubs than it is to bump into a fool when he's in one of his moods. The good thing about a bear, if there's a good thing about bear attacks, is they're going to come at you straight on. Bears aren't known for, hunting in packs or, one trying to distract you while the other bears ambush you. A mama bear is just going to come right at you. So at least you know what's coming. With a fool, they're unpredictable. You don't know what they're doing because they don't make sense. And so when they get in one of their moods and they're not thinking clearly, they can come at you from any angle, and there's no way to be prepared for what a fool is going to do. And so that's why it says it's better to meet a mama bear than a fool. We always need to have our guard up to discern when these fools are acting in their folly. It's in our best interest. Before moving on to the next thing, one more or two more verses, but they go together. Solomon is pleading with his son here in chapter 15 and verse 24. He says, the path of life leads upward for the prudent, that they may turn away from Sheol beneath. Of course, remember, Sheol is the place of the dead. So he's saying that wisdom becomes a matter of life and death. And then in chapter 24, verses 13 and 14, he says, my son, eat honey, for it is good, and the drippings of the honeycomb are sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is such to your soul. If you find it, there will be a future, and your hope will not be cut off. In these two verses, he talks about some literally dying because of foolishness and some preserving their life because of wisdom. It really is a matter of life and death. So he's talking about dealing with fools. Now we're going to shift gears and see the second piece of advice he has tonight, and that is about discerning the facts. He's going to talk about discerning the facts because in life, we have to make decisions, often split-second decisions all the time. And it's best if we have all the facts first and then make the best decision we can make. Proverbs 17:24 says this, the discerning sets his face toward wisdom, but the eyes of a fool are on the ends of the earth. He mentions discerning, or that word discernment. A form of that word is found almost 250 times in the Old Testament. And what this word means literally is between. The word discerning or discernment means between, because it often comes down to a person making a decision between two options. Do I go left or do I go right? Do I do it this way or do I do it that way? And I have to discern both of these options. Well, let's think about it. What happens if I do it this way? Okay, what happens if I do it that way? I discern the facts and I make a choice between these two. The discerning person sets his eyes towards wisdom. Lord, what would be the best way for me to do this? Let me gather all the facts. We can, as Christians, every day be faced with decisions between two things. Am I going to live for the Lord or am I going to live for the world? Look, we've already been saved. I'm not talking about salvation. As Christians, every day we still have decisions to make. Am I going to live for the Lord today or am I going to live for the world today? Just because I did it right yesterday is no guarantee I'm going to do it right again today. So let me discern the facts. Let me weigh the pros and cons. Let me see what options are on the table and then make the best decision possible. Will I be honest today or will I tell a lie if a lie helps me out of a jam? Will I surround myself with positive influences or will I allow myself to be around those people that are going to bring me down? We must discern between the facts and make the best decisions we can. Now, in context here, Solomon's concern was that his son discern between wisdom and folly. I mean, I'm talking about everyday life, but he's talking about wisdom and folly. In Proverbs 13, verses 15 and 16, he says this, good sense wins favor, but the way of the treacherous is their ruin. Every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool flaunts his folly. And then chapter 14, verses 8, 15, and 18 says this. This is verses 8, 15, and 18. He says, the wisdom of the prudent is to discern his ways, but the folly of fools is deceiving. The simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. The simple inherits folly, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. Now, in that passage, he used the word understanding. That's similar to the word for discernment. Discern means between, but here understanding, it refers to the ability to think through multiple scenarios and then make the right decision. You know, we expect our leaders to do this. It's why the president has a cabinet. And hopefully, you know, you say, well, you don't want the president to have just a bunch of yes men, people that'll just say, yeah, good idea, sure, no, go with that. You know, but it was Abraham Lincoln was famous for what he called the circle of his enemies. Lincoln brought people into his cabinet that were his political rivals, people that had run against him in different ways, that opposed him in different ways, because he wanted to hear opposing viewpoints. That's kind of refreshing, isn't it? These days we build our cabinets with the people that, you know, donated the most money or campaigned for us the hardest or, you know, will agree with us in lockstep on everything. I'd rather somebody that will sit there and tell me the opposite of what I want to hear and say, well, explain that to me. Well, have you thought about it like this? Actually, no, I never thought about it like that. Thank you for coming at it from a different angle. That's what it means to have understanding, to get all of these viewpoints and then discern between them and make the best choice that we can make. It's good for us to do that, not just with things like, should I buy this car, or should I apply for this loan, or, that's great in a lot of things in life, but just living the Christian life in general. There's a lot of times where we have to bring all these different facts to the table and help us make our decision. Wisdom can be learned over time, and that's the good thing. Proverbs 10, verse 23 says, doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding. The fools get a kick out of doing things that are wrong. To them, it's a laughing matter. It's something to joke about. But for the wise person, we want to do what's best. We don't want to do the wrong thing. We don't laugh about our mistakes. We want to grow from them. He talks about a foolish person doing wrong and having a good time. A lot of people think, if I want to have fun, if I want to have a good time, then I've got to do things that are unholy. And that's unfortunately a stereotype that people have created. You religious people, you're tightly wound, you're just a stick in the mud. Y'all can't have any fun. We have more fun in life because, we do this and we go here and we get to do these kinds of things and we have a lot more fun. Well, the life that those people might think is a lot more fun, a lot of times it comes with so many consequences that even if it was fun in the moment, it's probably not going to be fun down the road. I've never once had to worry about waking up with a hangover after having fun on Saturday. Now, I love life and I have fun. I enjoy my Saturdays, but I've never woken up with a hangover. Well, I'm enjoying life and I don't need to drink to enjoy life. To me, the people that think, if you really want to have fun, you need to come do this, I'm thinking, you don't know how to have fun if you need a substance to help you have fun. If you need to put something in your body to have fun, you're not doing it right. I have fun sober. That takes skill, right? I've got to find things to do in my right mind. Anybody can dumb down their senses and say, now I'm having a good time. You don't even know where you are and what day it is. I've never had to wake up with a tattoo and wonder where it came from. I've never had to find out that a girl I hooked up with at a party a few months later told me she was pregnant. You think you're having all the fun because you're doing that? Holy cow, what kind of baggage comes with the life you think is fun? I'm not worried about finding out I have cirrhosis of the liver from a lifetime of drinking. You think you're having fun? Well, enjoy your cirrhosis. I'm not trying to be, maybe that sounds cruel, but you're telling me that I can't have fun? I've got to do what you do to have fun? Man, I have the time of my life. I enjoy every day. I love the life that I have. I'm not bragging in any way, but I have the joy of the Lord in my soul, even on my worst days. I have a relationship with God. I spend time with my family. I've got friends and family from church. I enjoy life. They say, if you want to have fun, you've got to do it like this. Man, I have fun as a Christian, and I don't need to do those things to have fun. This life is pretty good in and of itself. Proverbs 15, verses 14 and 21. 14 and 21 together. It says, the heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouths of fools feed on folly. Folly is a joy to him who lacks sense, but to a man of understanding walks straight ahead. Here Solomon is picturing a foolish man feasting on his own folly, but a person of understanding is able to walk that straight and narrow path. It makes life so much easier. Proverbs 14:33 says, wisdom rests in the heart of a man of understanding, but it makes itself known even in the midst of fools. Wisdom rests or resides in the heart of a person. That means it's where wisdom lives. It's where it takes up residence. Is your heart wisdom's home? Ask yourself that question. Is my heart wisdom's home? He says wisdom resides in the heart of the godly person. Understanding is not hard for us to get. Remember, we've already seen at the beginning of this book that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so you might be thinking, I'm not a very wise person. Well, he's already told us, if we learn to fear God, if we learn to have respect for God, if we learn to have a holy reverence for God and submit ourselves to him, that is the beginning of wisdom. But it's those that think, I don't need God. Well, they're never going to acquire wisdom because they have not learned the fear of the Lord. But Proverbs 14:6 also says, a scoffer seeks wisdom in vain, but knowledge is easy for a man of understanding. And then Proverbs 19:8 says, whoever gets sense loves his own soul. He who keeps understanding will discover good. And then chapter 20, verse 5 adds, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Drawing it out, in context there, is talking about water, reaching down into the water and pulling something out. Sometimes it's hard to look down in the water and see. Our perception gets distorted just by the nature of the way, I think the light, if I'm correct here, the way the light refracts off of the water. Does that sound good? All right, cool. And so sometimes you might see something and you reach for it and it's really over there, a few inches that way. Sometimes the water is dark and murky and you look down and you can't really tell what you're looking at. The last 2 times I've gotten in the ocean, I've been stung by a jellyfish. If you go to the Gulf of Mexico side, like Galveston and Texas, the water is so dark, I think because of all the oil and stuff there. If you go to the Gulf side in Florida, like Destin or Clearwater, it's in the name of the city, the water is crystal clear and the sand is white. It's beautiful. But you can see if anything's coming at you, and it makes a big difference being able to see down the water and not. But he says a wise person is able to reach down and pull it out in order to discern what is taking place. The clearest water I've ever seen was when I was in Jamaica, and stuff that looked like it was just an inch or two below the surface was feet down. Like I thought I could reach for something, and then I couldn't hold my breath long enough to get down there and get it. It was so clear that I was able to see down a good ways without any kind of interruptions. And having wisdom in life is often compared to the ability to see. There are things that can cloud our judgment and distort our view, but if we have wisdom and discernment and understanding, we're able to see and see things for what they really are. And that's the goal. That should be what we are striving towards. Proverbs 10:13 says, on the lips of him who has understanding, wisdom is found, but a rod is for the back of him who lacks sense. When Scripture talks about the rod, what is it talking about? Discipline, absolutely. A rod for the back. That's not anything that we would look forward to. But a person who lacks sense is destined for nothing more than a rod for the back. Again, consequences for what we do. Foolish decisions, wrong decisions oftentimes lead to discipline. Parental discipline is a good thing. Many of us are grateful that we had parents that taught us right from wrong. Even though we didn't like it in the moment, we've benefited from it. Now, as we age, that parental discipline might be replaced by the Lord's discipline. And whom the Lord loves, he rebukes. And because God loves us, he will still bring the rod to our back, metaphorically, when we get out of line. And we might not like when God brings that rod into our lives, but if we learn to grow from that, just like we can now appreciate what our parents did for us, many of us can also say, I'm grateful that God did not let me live in my foolishness, but God brought that rod into my life and he drove my folly from me. Like the pestle and the mortar, God was able to grind that out of me. But we have to be flexible or we have to be teachable, moldable in order to learn those lessons. And then let's see, the very next verse, Proverbs 10:14, it says, the wise lay up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool brings ruin near. And then if we add to that, Proverbs 18:15, and I'm almost finished, but Proverbs 18:15 says, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. We must make the acquisition of knowledge one of our top priorities. We might have a bucket list of all these things that we want to do, but right now we need to have acquiring knowledge at the top, circled, underlined, and saying, if I don't have wisdom, this is what I must strive for. I need God's wisdom in my life. Proverbs 23:12 says, apply your heart to instruction and your ear to words of knowledge. And then 20:12 says, the hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord has made them both. God has made it possible for us to acquire ears that hear and eyes that see. As Jesus was fond of saying when he gave a parable, let him who has ears hear. If you're able to understand this, then you need to understand it. And so pray and say, Lord, would you give me eyes that can see, ears that can hear? Would you give me a discerning heart, an understanding mind? Because this life can get pretty complicated at times, but it doesn't have to be that way. God offers us this discernment. So as we close tonight, let's focus on these final 2 verses that show us how to build a house. And no, I'm not talking about the physical structure that we live in, but the house as a metaphor for our lives. Here's what Proverbs 24 says in verses 3 and 4, and we'll close with this. Proverbs 24, 3 and 4 says, "By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By wisdom, by knowledge the rooms are filled, and with all precious and pleasant riches." In this proverb, wisdom is personified as a person who wants to set out to build a house. And so we see exactly how to do it. Now, I'm no architect and I'm not in the construction industry, but we can learn a thing or two about how to build a good house from these two verses. First of all, you set out to do it. You recognize the need, the desire. I remember when I was in I think about third grade, third grade, our family decided we had outgrown our house, and we were going to move into a larger house. And I remember the process of my parents going through starting from scratch. We didn't look for houses for sale, but they found an empty lot and had a house built there. And I remember all the decisions. Well, I didn't make the decisions, but I remember they had a lot of decisions that had to be made. And if you've ever gone through that process of having a house built, there's all kinds of decisions that have to be made. But first, you establish the need for it. We've outgrown this house, or maybe it's we want to be in a better neighborhood, or maybe you're thinking something long-term, a place where I can retire, or I want more land, or whatever your decision is. But you establish the need. I need to build a house. And so then there's decisions that have to be made from there. Where and how and what it's going to look like, and all these choices that have to be made. But you have to have a desire to do it. You don't do it on a whim. You don't accidentally buy a house. It's got to be something that you desire to do. And that's true of our lives. We must say, I'm going to build a life. I'm not just going to float through life. I want to build a life. And I've got things that I want it to be. I've got a list of must-haves for my life. I want wisdom. I want to be godly. I want to be growing. I want to be a person who worships God and does everything for the glory of God. You make a list of things that you want in your own life. When you begin to build a house, the first step, or one of the early steps, is the foundation. You don't start building the roof. You start with the foundation. You've got to have a solid foundation. And what he tells us in this verse here is that the foundation is understanding. It's that discernment that we talk about. We've got to have that as the bedrock of our lives. The foundation must be strong if it's going to endure the test of time. And then eventually the house comes to completion and it's finished. And then the fun part for some of you begins decorating the house. Maybe you're your own interior designer and you picked out the color schemes and you decided what you wanted, what kind of floors you wanted, and if you wanted drapes here, or if you wanted to do paint color here, or whatever it is that you wanted in your house. And Solomon talks about filling the rooms with knowledge. We must have understanding, but that gives way to knowledge. When it's all finished, what does that mean? It means we're always growing, doesn't it? We're always learning. You don't just say, well, the house is finished, so that's that. Now we're filling the rooms with knowledge, where we know more today than we knew a week ago. We knew more a week ago than we did a year ago and a decade ago. And if we live another decade, I want to know more 10 years from now than I know today. We're always adding knowledge. See, you might have done up your house a certain way, but then you might look at it and say, this stuff's kind of dated. It was cutting edge when we did it. When we first moved into that house when I was in third grade, we had the linoleum floors, and they had kind of a pinkish, I think mauve might be the word for it. I kept hearing that when I was a kid. And so these linoleum floors, and it was all brand new at the time. It all looked really good. But then eventually those floors, I remember someone from our church came over. She wore high heels, and her high heels made impressions all through the linoleum floor. So eventually you look at those floors and you say, those were good for a while, but those floors have now been replaced with ceramic tile. And you've probably done the same thing in your house, where something gets broken and you fix it, or a color scheme you don't like, you've updated. The wallpaper came down and maybe you've just painted or something. We're never finished. We're always working. And that's what Solomon says. The final thing, if you will, is to fill the rooms with knowledge. We're never done as long as we're alive. We're always trying to add and grow. So is your house built and furnished with wisdom? Have you established your life on the foundation of understanding? And are you decorating it by bringing knowledge into your house? Who's your interior designer? Are you still trying to work on it, or have you just sat back and said, well, I'm all finished, I'm good to go? Or are you still doing some work? May we never be finished. May we always be trying to add knowledge. And by knowledge, I don't just mean facts. I don't just mean trivia. I don't just even mean Bible knowledge. I mean stuff that we put into practice. I mean sanctification. I mean growing, learning something, and then making sure that we apply it to our lives. So we always need to be growing because our house is never finished. That's where we are tonight. Next week, we're going to talk about one more thing, and then from there, we're going to look at the final two chapters, chapter 30 in its entirety, and then chapter 31 in its entirety, because those are kind of whole chapters that go together. So just one more topical night in Proverbs next week, and of course, then we'll break for Thanksgiving after that, but then when we come back in December, we'll finish up the book of Proverbs. So any other